They laughed when the girl led the scrawny Foal through the auction gate. His ribs showed, his holes were cracked, and one ear bent the wrong way. But he stared straight at the racing track, like he'd already seen the finish. And that night, he broke the county's silence, and its records. She stood at the edge of the auction pen, trying to look smaller than she already was. The wind tugged at her sleeves, and the dust caught in her eyelashes. Around her, men bargained over horses like they were sacks of grain. Strong legs, good teeth, tall backs. She didn't fit here, not in her thin coat with a missing button, and boots scuffed through at the heel. No one looked at her. That helped. The less they noticed, the longer she could stay without being asked to leave. The foal was last, left tethered to a bent post like someone had forgotten him. His legs looked too long for his body, and his ribs pushed against his coat like knives under cloth. One of his ears slumped sideways like it had once been stepped on and never healed right. People laughed when they saw him. A joke, a pity case. That one's more skeleton than cold, someone chuckled. Might as well give him away for the hide. She didn't laugh. She watched him. He wasn't scared, not exactly. He didn't flinch at the noise or the hands pointing. He just stood there, quiet and still, his eyes locked on nothing. Or maybe on something too far for them to see. She stepped closer. He didn't back away. She raised a hand, slow and open, and touched the side of his neck. The hair was coarse, dry like old rope, but the skin underneath was warm, alive, free to whoever will take him, the auctioneer barked. Come on now, just get him off the books. No one moved. I'll take him, she said, her voice barely louder than the wind. The men turned. Some blinked. Others smirked. One laughed out loud. But she didn't repeat herself. She stepped forward, untied the foal herself, and let him out with a piece of string she'd pulled from her coat pocket. No saddle, no cart, just feet on dirt and that slow, steady walk back through town. They called things after her. Hey, girl, you raising ghosts now? Better tie the thing to a stick so he don't blow away. But she didn't turn around. The foal kept pace beside her, never pulling, never pushing, just walking like he knew this wasn't the end. Just a pause before the next part. Her place sat near the edge of the dry gulch, a broken fence half swallowed by weeds. One window still had glass in it. The others were boarded or bare. The barn leaned sideways like it was embarrassed to be standing. She led the foal toward it, but he stopped cold at the threshold. She tugged gently. He didn't move. Not stubborn, not frightened. Just still, eyes fixed on the shadow inside like he saw something she didn't. She let go of the rope, sat down on the dirt beside him, her back against the splintered wood. The sun was starting to fall. The air smelled like dust and dry leaves. He stayed standing, close enough that she could hear his breath. You ain't pretty, she said, not looking at him. Ain't strong, neither. He blinked, but you stood still in front of all those people. A soft snort from his nose, not loud enough to mean anything. She closed her eyes. Her back hurt. Her hands ached. Her coat was too thin. She leaned her head on her knees and stayed quiet. When she looked again, he was lying beside her, not curled or folded, just flat on his side, like a child too tired to fake being awake. She slept near him that night. The moon passed over slow. Coyotes sang far off, and every time she stirred, he was still there, breathing, warm. By morning, she had a name for him. Birch, for the way he bent, not broke, for the white streak along his nose like a strip of peeling bark, for how he'd stood beside her even when he had no reason to. She didn't tell anyone about him. The town had its horses. Big, shiny, powerful ones that trotted with pride and snorted like thunder. Birch wasn't like that. He ate slow. He moved slow. But he watched everything. Birds in the trees. Squirrels in the grass. Her face when she thought no one could see. The first time she tried to lead him through the fence trail, he stopped again, just like he did with the barn, planted his feet. Refused. She looked where he looked. An old fence post, snapped clean in half with the top missing. Nothing special. Nothing scary. But Birch wouldn't pass, so they walked a long way around. Sometimes he'd stand by the well, not drinking, just staring. Sometimes he'd circle the shed twice before laying down. He never made noise, never panicked. But she learned quick not to push him when he said no. She found an old brush in the back of the cupboard. Bristles worn down, handle cracked. She used it anyway. Worked the knots out of his mane every morning. He didn't flinch. He just closed his eyes and breathed slow, like it meant something. One afternoon, as she brushed his legs, she noticed something odd. He didn't flinch when she touched the spot just above his back hoof, a spot where other horses kicked or twitched. He didn't even blink. She pressed there again, firmer. Still nothing. The skin felt tight, like scar tissue. She'd have to watch that. Maybe he'd been struck there. Maybe it never healed right. She kept brushing, kept walking him. Never once tried to make him run. He wasn't built for that, and she wasn't built for disappointment. But late one night, she woke to a sound. Not coyotes, not wind, hooves, fast ones. She rushed out, heart thudding. Birch was circling the pen, galloping, wrong-footed, crooked, but fast. She didn't call to him, just watched. The stars above didn't move, but she felt like the world did. ChatGPT said, the next morning, the sky was a color of tin. Not bright, not dark, just blank. She stepped outside, holding a pail of oats that wasn't full. Birch was already standing near the gate, ears twitching like he'd been waiting. She opened the gate and poured what little she had into the cracked wooden trough. He didn't eat right away, just nudged the rim of the bucket once, then looked toward the tree line. That's when she noticed the prints. A circle, not full hoof prints. Half marks, like he'd spun in place for a while. No mud, no rain, just dust. And yet there was a perfect loop around the post he'd slept beside. He never did that before. She squatted down, ran her fingers through the groove. Still warm. Maybe he'd been restless. Maybe he was dreaming. Or maybe he'd heard something she hadn't. When she brushed him later, Birch kept glancing toward the ridge above the creek. Not nervous, but intent. Focused. The same place the coyotes usually stayed away from. The same stretch where the old rancher's barn had burned down last year. She squinted. Nothing there but dry grass and old wire fencing. Still, Birch wouldn't take his eyes off it. That evening, she led him toward the trail behind the gulch. The long way, but he kept glancing back toward the split fence again. The same place he'd refused to cross the first day. Something about that corner, that broken post, made him uneasy. She'd started to feel it too. Not fear, just discomfort, like the world was too quiet there. No birds, no bugs, no rustling leaves. Just a kind of heavy silence that pushed against the ribs. They passed by fast, and she didn't look back. At night, Birch paced, not running, not panicked, just walking in slow, careful lines. Nose low, hoof soft. A pattern. She watched in the porch, wrapped in a blanket with the edges tucked under her chin. He circled 3 times, then stopped, then faced a barn, waited, then walked back to the same spot again. By the 3rd night, he'd worn a shape into the ground. She followed it one morning, stepping into the soft dust with bare feet. There was something in the dirt, half buried. She knelt, dug gently with her fingers. A sliver of metal, curved. She cleaned it off with the hem of her dress. It was part of an old horseshoe, split clean down the middle. She turned it over. There, a carve mark, worn but familiar. Her father's. He used to brand all his horseshoes with that notch, a tiny bird wing pressed into the iron. The best racers wore it. Her voice caught in her throat. She hadn't seen that mark in years. Not since the fire. Not since the day everything burned. She looked at Birch. He was still, waiting. She didn't cry. Not really. Just pressed the broken metal to her chest and stood for a long time. He walked up beside her, touched his nose to her elbow, and blinked once, then stood by her side until the wind changed. The Flyers went up that afternoon. County race. 5 weeks. Prize money enough to repair her roof and fence. But that wasn't what caught her eye. It was the location, the old fairground, the one where her father's last racehorse collapsed on the final stretch. People said he pushed too hard, said the horse's heart gave out trying to please a man who never gave it rest. She remembered that day. She was 10. The whole town watched her father fall to his knees when the vet shook his head. She remembered the silence, the shame, the way folks avoided their eyes when they passed her afterward. That was the last time they ran any horse under her name. She folded the flyer and slid it into her pocket. Birch was staring at her. He did that sometimes, not in a dumb animal way, but in a way that made you feel like your skin didn't cover everything, like he saw through things. Later that week, she started walking him faster. Circles in the dry patch behind the house. Then figure eights. Then short bursts along the road while the light lasted. Birch didn't stumble anymore. He found a rhythm. It was odd, too low to the ground, too wild in the turns, but it worked. His legs bent the wrong way, but they always caught him. People started noticing. The old widow from the ridge stood by the fence and watched once, said nothing, just watched. Then the mail boy, then 2 farmhands from across the creek. Nobody said it out loud, but they'd heard. The girl with the skeleton horse was training for the race. One morning, as Birch trotted along the outer fence, someone tossed a rock near his feet. He didn't flinch, didn't even look back. She turned. A boy, maybe 17, stood there holding another. Just helping you toughen him up, he sneered. He'll need it when real horses start running. She said nothing, just stood still, eyes steady. The boy turned and walked off, but not before muttering something under his breath. Better off turning him into glue. She knelt in the dirt after he left and picked up the rock. It wasn't sharp, but her hand tightened around it anyway. Birch stepped close and nudged her shoulder. She let the stone fall. That night, the wind picked up. Birch paced again, but slower. She watched the way his eyes kept flicking toward the horizon, toward the place no one walked, the place lightning had struck the summer before. Just once. Left a scar in the trees and burned the bark off a cottonwood stump. Some folks whispered that tree never stopped smoldering. They said it hissed in the rain, said animals refused to stand near it. She thought about the way Birch avoided that path. How his hooves always skidded when they got close. How his breath quickened when she didn't turn away fast enough. She looked at the sky. No stars. No moon. Just blackness too thick for night. Birch stood still, facing the ridge, like he was waiting for something to move. The day started dry and sharp, the kind of morning where every sound cracked louder than it should. Birch stood near the gate before she even stepped outside, his head tilted toward the road. Not the trail to the fairground, the other way. The place with the broken tree and the scorched stump. She froze in the doorway, hand still on the knob. He wasn't moving, but his ears twitched fast. Something had him on edge. Not panic. Focus. She whistled soft, low. His head turned slightly, but he didn't walk to her. He just stayed there like a sentry, like he was keeping something out or in. She left the door open and walked toward him. He didn't break his stance until she got close enough to touch his shoulder. Then, like a snapped string, he turned and nudged her forward. Not hard, just enough to lead. He wanted to go somewhere. She led him down the side path, around the gulch, past the edge of the old cattle fence. The ground felt strange beneath her boots, too soft in places, like someone had dug recently and filled it back. Birch stopped at the edge of a bramble tangle. His front hoof pawed once, twice. Then he stepped back. She crouched, pulling the brush apart. Something caught the sunlight. Fabric, maybe? No, Twine. A bundle of twine tied around a leather strip. It looked like an old lead rope. She pulled gently. It came free, easy, no tension. But the other end was frayed. Cut, not torn. Birch exhaled behind her. She stood slowly. He turned without her asking, led her back toward the house. That night, the ribbon reappeared. Her mother's. It had gone missing years ago, lost in a flood that swept through their barn when she was small. It was pink once, now stained a dull gray, but she recognized the frayed edge and the stitched initials. It was caught in the slats of the outer fence, fluttering in a breeze that didn't reach the grass. She climbed the fence and took it down. Birch stood at her side, ears forward. She tied it to the rope she used to lead him. It didn't look like much, but it felt like something was coming full circle. The race was in 2 days. She didn't sleep much that night. The house creaked in places it never had. Birch paced, again, same 3 steps, same stop. But this time, after the 3rd circle, he stared up at her window and didn't look away. She sat at the edge of her bed, watching him until dawn. In the morning, the farrier came by, uninvited but polite, an older man with wide hands and a crooked hat. He stood by the pen and watched Birch run slow laps. When he finally spoke, it was quiet. "I shod your daddy's last racer." She didn't answer. He had fire. That horse, too much, burned himself out. She nodded once. "This one's different," the farrier said. "Got a wrong gait. Legs too long. No rhythm. But he's got something." "What?" "Quiet." He chewed on the word like it tasted funny. "He's listening. Not just to you. To everything." She didn't know what to say. So she didn't say anything at all. The farrier left a small bag of oats on the post. "For luck," he said. That afternoon, she walked Birch down the long path toward the field. Not to train, just to move. Let him breathe new air. He stopped twice along the way. Both times, at places where something fell off. The first was by the creek, where an old saddle lay half buried. Too new to be junk. Too far from the trail to be dropped by accident. She left it there. The second was at the edge of the lightning tree. Birch wouldn't go near it. He stood like stone, refusing to budge. When she stepped toward it, he whinnied, a sharp, unnatural sound that didn't suit him. She stepped back. His breath eased. They left without touching it. She didn't ask questions. Birch didn't offer answers. The night before the race, she cleaned him as best she could, brushed his coat, trimmed his hooves. He let her work without fuss. But when she finished and leaned against him, he didn't rest like usual. He stayed alert, watching. The sky that night was yellowed near the edges. Storms, maybe, or just heat. But the silence had a sound now. A tension, like something was about to snap. The race was set for noon. She arrived early. People stared, same as before. Same comments. Same looks. But some were quieter this time, watching harder. A few recognized the ribbon on her rope. Fewer remembered whose mark that horseshoe scar came from. The track was rough dirt and dry weeds. Not polished like the city racers had, but it was honest ground, the kind that kept secrets. The other horses were slick with oil and shine, muscle and polish, ribbons already tied around their necks. Jockeys sat high, smirking. She walked Birch to the line by hand. He stood calmly. His ears didn't twitch. His legs didn't shift. He just watched the line. When the gun fired, they were last off the start. On purpose. Birch waited half a second, then moved. Not fast, not smooth, but deliberate. They passed one horse before the curve, another near the fence. The third, the one people bet on, tried to block the inside lane. Birch didn't blink. He swerved wide, found the opening, surged forward. Not beautiful, but unstoppable. And somewhere near the final turn, silence fell. The crowd stopped shouting. The trackside announcer stuttered. All eyes locked on the crooked-legged foal who wasn't supposed to run, wasn't supposed to survive. And now he was closing the final gap, like he'd been waiting his whole life for this stretch of dirt. She didn't look at the other riders. She didn't look at the finish line. She kept her eyes on Birch. He was already looking past it. The dust hung in the air behind him like a tail. Birch didn't charge the finish. He arrived at it, as if it had always belonged to him, and he was just coming home. The other horses, sleek and trained and polished, strained at their bits, foam at their mouths, breath ragged. Birch looked like he hadn't broken a sweat. His legs, crooked as they were, hadn't buckled once. His chest heaved slow, controlled, still watching the horizon. No one clapped. Not at first. Just silence. Then someone near the fence muttered, "What in the hell did we just see?" She dismounted gently, not because he was tired, but because it felt wrong to do anything quick. The judge walked toward her, hat in hand, eyes flicking from her face to the foal's bent legs. He held out the ribbon. She didn't take it right away. "What's his name?" the judge asked. "Birch," she said, brushing dust from his flank. "Birch," he echoed, like the word tasted unfamiliar. "He didn't run right." "No," she agreed. "He didn't." "He won," the judge added after a moment. "Clearly. Time's not even close." People had started to move now, gathering near the pen, the same ones who'd laughed days ago. Men with high boots and silver spurs, women in polished buttons, farm hands, widows, the mail boy, some of them squinting, others just staring. The mayor stepped forward. "You have a gift there, miss," he said too loudly, like he was performing. "How much you want for him?" "I'm not selling," she replied. A low murmur spread. The mayor blinked. "You sure? You'd get 5 times what any colt's worth. 10. That leg's strange but fast. You bred him yourself." "No. Where'd you get him?" "Didn't. He was left." People shifted, uncomfortable. Birch turned his head slightly, meeting the mayor's eyes, just for a second, long enough that the man stepped back. Another man, lean, sunburnt, wearing a deputy badge, whispered, "That horse ain't right." "He's perfect," she said, hand resting on Birch's neck. The sun moved higher. Heat shimmered on the dirt track, and yet no one moved toward the winner's podium. Like something invisible stood between them and the ribbon post. Someone else muttered, "That horse looked straight through me." Whispers grew. Superstition clung to their boots like dust. He came out of nowhere. Never seen eyes like that. Didn't blink when the starter fired the gun. They say some animals know storms before they come. Maybe he's got that kind of knowing. "She's cursed," said a voice behind the fence. "Or maybe he is." She took the ribbon gently and tied it, not to her coat, but around Birch's chest, over the part where his ribs didn't quite match. It fluttered once, caught the wind, and then fell still. The farrier appeared again. She hadn't seen him enter. He stood near the edge of the crowd, arms folded, eyes low. He nodded once at her, then turned and walked away. That night, the wind returned, sharp and cold. She didn't go inside, built a small fire near the fence, and Birch stood close by, not restless, not pacing, but alert, always watching. The moon was thin, the trees still, and then, far off, came a sound she hadn't heard in years. A single, sharp whinny, not Birch's, echoing from the ridge. She stood, quickly. Birch didn't move, just stared. She took one step toward the sound, and Birch blocked her. Not rough, just firm. He nudged her backward. She obeyed, but something flickered in the corner of her eye, a flash of white at the fence post. She turned. The horseshoe, the broken one she'd found in the dirt. It was missing. Birch hadn't worn it since the race. It had hung from the fence post on a nail. Now it was gone. She checked the ground. No prints, no hoof marks, nothing but wind. Birch stepped beside her, turned his head slowly, and looked toward the lightning tree. She followed his gaze. A low light flickered at the base of the trunk. Blue, faint, almost like a lantern, but colder. No sound, no smoke. She didn't go toward it, just whispered, "You see it too?" Birch didn't blink. The next morning, people came to her fence. They didn't call her names this time, didn't throw rocks, just asked questions in low voices. "How'd you train him? Where'd he come from? Does he sleep at all?" She didn't answer most of them, just nodded once or shook her head. Birch stood behind her, still as ever. That afternoon, she found the horseshoe. It was placed neatly at the base of the barn door. Cleaned, polished. The notch was deeper now, as if recarved. She didn't touch it. Birch stood beside it, lowered his head, touched it once with his nose, then walked away. She left it there. By evening, clouds rolled in from the south. Lightning cracked once, far, but close enough to shake the windows. Birch didn't flinch. He just stood near the fence, watching the ridge. Again, waiting. The storm didn't come that night. It stayed curled on the horizon, like a promise that hadn't been kept yet. The sky flickered now and then, silent, pale lightning behind the clouds, but no thunder followed. Just Birch standing at the fence line, motionless as stone, his head tilted slightly toward the north. She sat on the porch with her knees pulled up under her coat. The old horseshoe still rested where she left it, just outside the barn, clean and dry despite the wind. She hadn't picked it up. Couldn't. Not after finding it moved like that. Not when the air felt the way it did now. Thick, quiet, strange. In town, word had spread faster than the dust. People spoke Birch's name like it might bring luck or misfortune, depending on how they said it. Some came to see him, not to admire, but to confirm something. They stared too long, waited for him to do something odd. Most left without a word, unsettled in ways they couldn't name. One man left a Bible on her porch without knocking. By morning, the wind had dropped, a fog had crept in low, rolling across the gulch like it dragged across the ground. She couldn't see the trees at all, but Birch didn't move, still at the fence line, still watching the place where the light had flickered near the lightning tree. His ears didn't twitch. His breath stayed slow. When she brought water, he didn't drink, just touched the bucket once with his nose, then turned away. It scared her, but not like sickness. It felt more like waiting, like he had no interest in food or water until something else happened. Something he already knew was coming. That evening, she tried to lead him down the ridge trail, away from the field, away from the tree. He resisted, not violently, just stopped and stared. She stepped in front of him, blocking his view. "There's nothing there," she whispered. But she didn't believe it. Not fully. Not after everything. So she let him turn back. And that's when she saw it. Footprints. Only a few. Bare feet. Too large for a child. Too small for a man. The toes dug deep into the mud, like whoever left them had walked slowly. Hesitantly, they trailed from the edge of the creek, straight toward her fence. Then stopped. No return path. She knelt to touch one. The earth was damp, but warm where her fingers landed. The print hadn't been there long. Birch was standing close behind her now. She could feel his breath on her shoulder. She didn't turn around, just whispered, "You knew." The next day, the creek overflowed. Not a flood, just enough water to drown the path that led to the tree. As if it was trying to hide something, Birch wouldn't go near it. He stood on the rise, staring down at the edge where the water shimmered. The same cottonwood stump poked from the center, blackened and rotted, like a burned tooth in the earth. That night, she lit the lamp and sat at the table, turning the cleaned horseshoe in her hands. The carved notch had deepened since she last held it. She was sure of it now. Her father's mark, but bolder, almost too sharp to touch. She remembered the night he carved it into every iron shoe, swearing one of them would run with it into legend. One did, but it wasn't a legend people spoke of. Not anymore. Birch stood at the window, watching her, watching the shoe, watching something beyond. The wind came again, not strong, just steady. This time, The front gate creaked open on its own. She stepped onto the porch with the shoe still in her hand, her fingers wrapped tight around the cold iron. The fog had returned, but something stood in it now. Not a figure, a shape. She couldn't see it clearly, but it was there, past the fence near the edge of the field. Something tall, still, not walking, not breathing, just waiting. Birch didn't react, didn't move, just stepped down from the porch and stood beside her. She held the horseshoe tighter, not like a weapon, like a question. The shape didn't approach, but the fog thickened, and then the ribbon came. It floated from the field like it had been tossed by a hand. Light, slow, the same ribbon tied to Birch's rope. It drifted gently through the fog, hovered over the grass, and landed at her feet without a sound. She knelt, picked it up. It was damp, but not from rain. She untied it from the rope and held it in her palm. Birch stepped forward, then turned, back toward the field, back toward the tree, back toward the fog. She followed, one step at a time, boots sinking into the wet grass, heart ticking louder than the wind. As they neared the tree, the fog parted slightly, and the stump was glowing. Not burning, glowing. Soft, pale blue light, like breath frozen in winter. She stopped. Birch kept walking, right up to the stump, and then stopped. He lowered his head, pressed his nose to the charred wood. The light vanished. Gone. Just smoke now. Just wind. She took a step forward, and that's when she saw what had been left. At the base of the stump, under Birch's hooves, another horseshoe. Whole, untouched, new, but carved with the same mark. Her father's, except it wasn't rusted. It gleamed. Birch looked back at her, eyes steady, then turned again toward the house. And she knew this wasn't about winning a race. It never was. She didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but because the silence felt full, like the air itself was listening. Birch stood near the barn, not tied, not penned, just standing, watching the horizon. The new horseshoe, the one that glowed, rested in the center of the porch, right where she left it. She hadn't touched it, didn't need to. It wasn't meant to be used. It was meant to be seen. By morning, something had changed in town. The whispers weren't about curses anymore. They were softer now, curious, careful, the kind of talk that carried reverence, not suspicion. Some said Birch wasn't a horse at all, said he came from some old bloodline out west, bred by people who knew the land better than maps ever could. Others said he was part spirit, part shadow, a message left walking. But nobody laughed anymore. That part was gone. She walked Birch through town slow that morning, not because she wanted to, but because it felt necessary. People stepped aside, not out of fear, but something older. A man touched his hat. A child whispered, "That's him." Birch didn't look left or right. His eyes were on the church steeple, on the graveyard behind it. She understood. She led him there. The gate creaked open as they approached, though no one touched it. Birch walked calmly between the rows, past old stones and weather-worn names. He stopped near the far corner, beside a marker that had broken in half years ago. No name left on it, just a square of slate leaning against dry earth. Her father's. She hadn't visited since the day they buried him. Couldn't, wouldn't. Too much shame. Too much of that final day at the track still echoing in her bones. Birch stood still, then lowered his head, and that's when she saw it. Not under his hooves this time, but in the dirt by the stone. A second ribbon. Torn. Faded. Pink. Her mother's. Or maybe not. Maybe it was one of many. Maybe it was all the same. She picked it up, tied it around the horseshoe she brought. The old one, not the glowing one. The broken one. She left it there beside the stone. Not buried. Not hidden. Just resting. As if to say, this is where the race ends. Or maybe where it begins. They walked home under a sky too still for wind. No birds called. No dogs barked. The world just watched them go. When they reached the fence, Birch didn't stop. He walked through the open gate, past the porch, and stood where he always did, by the edge of the yard, facing the ridge. But this time, he wasn't alone. Another horse stood beside him, not close, not touching, a mare dark-coated, with white streaks down her legs like old paint running. She wasn't from any ranch nearby. No one knew where she came from, but she didn't flinch, didn't shy away, just stood with him, quiet. Then another came, then two more. By nightfall there were 7. No ropes, no brands, no saddles, just horses, all different, all silent, waiting. Birch stood in the middle, and for the first time he looked at her, not past her, not through her, at her. It felt like a goodbye, but it wasn't. It was something softer. She walked up, touched his shoulder, and pressed her forehead to his neck. He was warm, breathing, real. Then, without signal or sound, Birch turned, and the others followed. Down the gulch, across the creek, toward the ridge. She watched until they vanished past the tree line, swallowed by fog that wasn't supposed to be there. She never saw him again. But the field grew greener that spring. The fence never needed mending. And every time lightning flashed beyond the hills, she looked up and smiled. They say a foal with a bent ear outran every horse in the county. But the truth isn't about speed. The truth is, nobody wanted him until he chose to stay, and then chose to leave. A quiet legend, not for glory, but for grace. Ask ChatGPT.